In this video, we will be discussing the nasal cavity and perhaps a little bit of the nasopharynx. So the nasal cavity, we have one nasal cavity that is divided left and right by a nasal septum, which is shown in this particular cadaver. And if we took that septum off, this is what we'd see. And on the inside of the nasal cavity, we're going to have conchae, which are the turbinates, and meatai are the spaces. So let's first talk about the conchae. This very dorsal ridge of tissue, very small here, is called the dorsal nasal concha. All of this tissue that arises from here through here and down here is the ventral nasal concha. And these three little sort of finger-like projections coming from that cribriform plate are the ethmoid concha. In terms of the spaces, that we call those meatai or meatuses. So if I put my probe dorsal to the dorsal concha, I'm in the dorsal nasal meatus. Between the dorsal and middle, or excuse me, ventral concha is the middle nasal meatus. And ventral to the ventral concha is the ventral nasal meatus. And this, of course, is the most clinically significant of the three, and that is where we would want to try to pass a nasogastric tube. Along the nasal septum, which is absolutely absent in here, then would be our common nasal meatus. And you can see it's common because it'd be common to the dorsal, middle, and ventral areas. One of the things I want to point out that's in this nasal cavity is this little hole right here. And that would be the opening for the nasolacrimal duct. So tears that are produced in the eyes will travel through that nasolacrimal duct and exit into the nasal cavity. As we traverse from our nasal cavity, which we can define because of the hard palate, as we progress farther, there's an opening between the nasal cavity and the nasopharynx. And that opening is called the choana, C-H-O-A-N-A-E. Is that right? And that communicates with the nasopharynx. So whenever we see soft palate, dorsal to that would be in our nasopharynx. An interesting structure that we'd like to pay attention to in the nasopharynx would be the nasopharyngeal opening of the auditory tube, or what is referred to as the eustachian tube. So that concludes our little tour of the nasal cavity and the nasopharynx.